Hello and welcome back to IFR in the Golden State series. In the last video, we departed from San Luis Obispo and got handed over to Santa Barbara of departure. Today, we'll continue the Enroute segment of the flight to Monterey, California. Let's jump in. Previously, we were handed over to Santa Barbara approach and continue our climb to our cruise altitude of 6,000. We're still using the autopilot backcourse function to help us climb out of the localizer from San Luis Obispo. As we enter into our Enroute segment, you will hear some of the real ATC communications during the actual time of flight from Santa Barbara approach, and as well as the center later on.
Tower 6885 here, short 29, will be a slight right turn on departure to the north.
Since we're going through the entire air traffic control system for this flight, I'm going to briefly talk about each component within the air traffic control system. The first encounter with ATC during your departure is likely the ground control. They're responsible for aircraft movement on taxiways, directing traffic from the terminal to runway. And then we're going to move on to tower, which manage active runways, clearing the aircraft for takeoff and landing, and they usually can see you with their own eyes when you land and depart.
Conquest 685 San Luis, hold short runway 2 minutes.
Airport tower usually has a terminal radar that monitors the traffic within the designated airspace in its vicinity, but their role is to coordinate local traffic and through traffic within its airspace. Depending on the tower and local rules, tower will hand you over to the approach as early as you reaching 400 feet AGL or when you fly out of the airport's airspace. In most cases, tower wants to hand you over to approach or center as soon as practical since they want to release their responsibility from you.
Marine 559er, descend and maintain 5,000. Continue down to 5,000, Marine 559.
Now, the terminology of approach and departure is actually referring to TRACON, which is the Terminal Radar Approach Control. In this case, we're handed over to Santa Barbara TRACON and we're departing out of the Santa Barbara vicinity. We're under their control, so we talk to their departure. TRACON usually manages the arrival and departure traffics within the 30 to 50 nautical miles from the major airport, as well as the satellite airports nearby. What's unique about California is that they have two major TRACONs operating multiple approaches in a larger area since there are multiple major air hubs closely spaced together. SoCal, as an example, has 6 unique operational areas, all tasked with different area controls such as oceanic arrival, southern border traffics, but they all work together closely and jointly they are called SoCal.
November 5 Delta Bravo, squawk 0155.
Now what's left in the ATC system is the center. They manage Enroute traffics over vast regions. They also serve the same function of TRACON for airport in remote areas, but majority of the time, you will talk to the center when you're en route or flying in high altitudes over densely populated area.
November 5 Delta Bravo, radar contact 1 mile southwest of Oceano Airport at 3,000. San Maria altimeter 3000. Maintain VFR and procedures requested. Are you familiar with the warning area of 532 south? November 5 Delta Bravo, roger. And you can continue inbound for the ILS runway 12 for Vandenberg, and part of that approach is in the warning area, so use caution.
Now, based on our current altitude and location, we're under the control of Santa Barbara approach. If we go above certain altitude, we will be handed over to LA Center. LA Center is situated directly above all the TRACON approaches, the SoCal, Santa Barbara approach, so they are responsible for high altitude traffics. Now, based on our flight plan and the LA Center sectors, we're less likely to be handed over to LA Center since the Oakland Center is very close to the border of Santa Barbara approach. And again, as much as we anticipate our next controller, we will never know for certain. But it's always a good idea to be situational aware and stay ahead of our plane. Now we're cruising at 6,000 feet going to Crepe intersection before turning towards Paso Robles Vortex. Typically, the ATC might give you a shortcut to direct you to their next waypoint. but this time I'm guessing they're gonna want us to fly the entire flight plan. Coming over to creep intersection, what we're going to anticipate is to stay the current heading on the green needle until we're over creep intersection before turning inbound towards Paso Robles. Now, if we're using the GPS, we'll temporarily switch over to OBS so the airplane will fly our current heading until over creep intersection, and then we can switch back to nav mode to track for Paso Robles inbound. Now, as I mentioned earlier, how I use the G1000s to track nav8 is I use nav1 for all active tracking and nav2 for monitoring purposes. As we fly over the creep intersection, I'm going to switch our nav1 to standby, which I already set it for Paso Robles. And then we're going to turn our CDI needle to 016 to track inbound to Paso Robles. As of right now, we can see under the nav2 monitoring, which is supported by GPS, we can see we're on a 016 bearing to Paso Robles and 21.9 nautical miles. Looking at the creep 3 departure, this is exactly how they define creep intersection. So we're going to switch over to Paso Robles on active nav1 and turn the CDI needle to 016. As expected, when we change our active nav frequency to Paso Robles, the G1000 reverts to roll mode until we re-engage the nav mode. Looking further at the CDI needle, the outer arrow and the inner arrow are pointing at the same directions, which means to the station, as expected. What we're going to do right now is just to monitor the autopilot, just making sure it's tracking the inbound towards Paso Robles. If we look at the low IFR Enroute chart, we can see there's this wiggly blue line that is the border between LA Center and Oakland Center. What that reminds me is to put the Oakland Center 128.7 on our COM1 standby, as well as putting the Salina vortex frequency on nav1 standby and nav2 active for monitoring. As I'm looking at the nav2 monitoring for Salina vortex, the identifier as well as the DME doesn't make sense. So I made sure that I look into the Salina's vortex frequency and found out the correct one is actually 117.3. So let's correct that. Now the DME is showing the Salina identifier and the distance make more sense. As we're cruising along, I just want to point out that when we're reaching the Paso Robles, we'll enter a cone of confusion, and to identify the Victor 25 for our next segment of our flight, we'll make sure that our nav2, which is monitoring the Salina vortex, displays a radio of 306. That's when we know we're turning on the Victor 25 airway. As we're getting closer to the Oakland Center, I'm anticipating a frequency change very soon. November 258 Juliet Tango, change my frequency to Oakland Center 128.7. Over to 128.78 Juliet Tango. Oakland Center, November 258 Juliet Tango 6000, direct Paso Robles. November 258 Juliet Tango, roger, local altimeter 3002. 3002 A Juliet Tango. Now that we're on Oakland Center, let's take a closer look at our fuel quantity indicator on the multifunction display. We have our left tank and right tank white tip mark, which is showing roughly 13 gallons per tank. A typical fuel burn for a Cessna 172 at around 2,300 RPM is about 8 gallons an hour. That gives us roughly 3 hours of fuel on board. Looking at the estimate time en route is about 45 minutes. That gives us more than 2 hours of reserve fuel, which is definitely more than the 45 minutes minimum IFR reserve fuel required.
November 688 Sierra, roger that, and the pass roll altimeter 3002.
3002-850.
5681, descend and maintain flight level 180.
Maintain flight level 180, 5681.
November 8, 7 Whiskey Sierra, phone center, welcome back. The pass roll altimeter 3002.
3002, yeah.
Victor 549, contact NorCal approach 124.52, good day.
2452, Victor 549.
Coming up to Paso Robles Vortex, since this is not a flyover waypoint, so what we're going to do is half mile before reaching the vortex, we're going to twist our CDI needle to 306. It should align the Victor 25 airway perfectly.
Oakland, Victor 549, can I get that frequency? Victor 549, NorCal approach 124.52, 2452. 2452, thank you, 549.
Open connecting Air 99 Romeo Alpha 200.
November 99 Romeo Alpha from center, welcome. I'll have a lower for you in about 4 minutes.
Thanks.
If we'll be doing this manually without autopilot, we will be turning inbound 306 with that magenta diamond and wait for a couple minutes before we make any further adjustment, since the VOR is going to be very sensitive when we're really close to the station.
Got 6681, descend and maintain 9,000. San Luis Obispo altimeter 29,999.
Maintain 9,000. Altimeter 299, we got 5681.
Coming up in front of our Victor 25 airway is the restricted area 2504, as well as the MOA. Since the ATC didn't instruct us to fly other ways, we're on this established airway, so we can assume that it's safe for us to fly through it.
Drive 799 Oakland Center, welcome, descend and maintain flight level 200.
So far we have a pretty uneventful flight, but to help us plan ahead, we can put in the ADAS from Monterey on our COM2 standby.
Good afternoon, good morning, Central today. 305 Kilo, he's on 240-4200.
308 Kilo, good center after.
At this stage of our flights, I'm going to go ahead and review our approach plate. Since we are direct to Wiggle under our flight plan, we're going to look under the localizer 28 left, which is likely going to be our assigned instrument approach procedure. Looking at the approach plate, we'll be using the localizer DME at Monterey on a frequency of 110.7. The approach course is 278, and is DME or radar required. We are actually equipped with DME and as well as GPS in lieu of DME. Before crossing our initial approach fix at Wiggle, we'll be at 6,100 feet or whatever ATC instructs us to do.
301 Mike Kilo, descend and maintain level 180.
1 Mike Kilo.
After passing Wiggle, we can descend down to 5,400 feet until reaching ETOT, then descend down to 4,600 to our final approach phase at Rodney. Noting the descent angle for this approach procedure is 3.5 degrees. At 90 knot ground speed, that will roughly gives us 550 feet per minute descent angle. After Rodney, we can descend down to 4,060 feet at Wuchun, followed by Zilku at 3,020 feet. Then we can descend down to our minimum descent altitude 1860. Noting our VDP, our visual descent point, which is 4.1 DME from Monterey localizer. This is the point where we can safely descend down to land at a normal descent rate if we have the visual for runway 28 left. For us to identify all the waypoints, we can use the DME from Monterey localizer. We can also use the Selena vortex to identify our intermediate fix at Churro, which is the radio 140 from Selena and the localizer inbound 278. Our missed approach procedure will be climbing 3,000, then right turn climbing to 5,000 on the heading of 360. and then going to the Salina vortex on a radio 264, hold the vortex. Besides the approach play briefing, Monterey Airport has a special document issued by FAA under the facility directory. The airport is noted as a high risk of runway intrusion. Looking at the ground surface landing notes, people often mistakenly land on runway 2A right instead of runway 2A left. So for us, we'll keep in mind that when we see the runway, we'll want to make sure that we have the runway 2A left inside. It's often a good idea to actually review the facility directory for the airport of your destination beforehand, so you will know if there's any special notes and handling procedures you need to be aware of. Another important document we should be reviewing before we land is the Monterey taxi diagram. As we can see, the runway we intend to land to a left is more than 7,000 feet, planning for a Cessna 172. Our intended destination will be at Del Monte FBO. Looking at the airport diagram, it might not show the FBO location. It's always good to review the Google satellite image to make sure we have the correct location. In this case, we're anticipating either exit on Lima or Juliet, taxiway Alpha, to our final destination at Del Monte. Let's now try tuning to the Monterey ATIS, see if we can pick up the weather.
Wind calm, visibility 10, sky condition 10,000 scattered, temperature 16, dew point 6, altimeter 2994. Break to the visual range, street left approaching use, landing and departing range, street left and right. 10 to aircraft running, tail line separated 500 feet, Your activity 2 nautical miles northeast Marine Airport and a 4 nautical mile radius, service to 1,000 feet, use caution. Monterey Tower, ACE information echo, time 1645 Zulu, wind calm, visibility 10, sky condition 10,000 scattered, temperature 16, dew point.
Alright, we have information echo, sounds like it's wind calm and 2A left and right, so we're probably going to use the localizer 2A left for the approach as expected. I did hear something about parallel runway center lines 500 feet apart, make sure we have the correct runway assignment, and something about maybe drone activity 2 nautical miles northeast of the airport. It shouldn't be a factor for us since we're approaching from the southeast of the airport, but we can always double check once we get closer, listen to the ATIS again. And right now I'm just putting in our approach into our GPS for runway 2A left localizer, and the minimums would be 1860 for us. And I'm going to activate wiggle under the ILS localizer approach. And if we're actually using the GPS for the flight plan instead of the green needle, I will not activate the wiggle under the approach until we're clear for it.
Bing 11, climb maintain level 190. Sky was 5681, contact Sandbar approach 127.72.
127.72, Sky was 5681, good day.
Good day. Bing 11, climb maintain level 240. Bing 11, contact Oakwood Thunder 290.5.
Alright, at this point of the flight, I'm going to sit back and relax and just monitor the flight plan. But it seems like we have 20 minutes to go before we are handed over to NorCal approach. At this point, we're just going to fast forward our trip. I also put in the NorCal approach that we're going to be handed over later. It should be 127.15 since we're on a 304 heading. As we're getting closer to Monterey, we're going to listen to the ATIS once again. I'm not expecting a new ATIS coming out because they usually come out every hour, but let's hear that and write it down.
Monterey Tower, ACE information echo, time 1645 Zulu, wind calm, visibility 10, sky condition 10,000 scattered, temperature 16, dew point 6, altimeter 29094. Break to the visual range, street left approaching use, landing and departing range, street left and right. Central aircraft runway line separate 500 feet and turn line for the correct runway. Direct activity 2 nautical miles northeast Marine Airport and a 4 nautical mile radius surface 1,000 feet. Use caution. Personnel and equipment working in the runway safety area. Runway 28 left approach end east side. Use caution. Advise on contact. You have ACE information. Echo. Monterey Tower, ACE information. Echo. Time 1645 Zulu. Wind calm. Visibility 10. Sky condition 10,000 scattered. Temperature 16. Dew point 6. Altimeter 2900 904. Brace the visual range tweet left approach in use. Landing and departing range tweet left.
Alright, so we still have echo, but they just added there's personnel and equipment on the runway safety area for runway 28 left. So we'll use caution. I still couldn't quite figure out if it's the drone activity northeast at 500 feet, but it shouldn't be a factor for us. As we cruise along on Victor 25 and getting closer to our initial approach fix at Wiggle, Oakland Center instructed us to change our frequency to NorCal approach. Number 258 Juliet Tango, contact NorCal approach 127.15. Over to NorCal on 127.15, 8 Juliet Tango, good day. NorCal approach, Cessna 258 Juliet Tango, 6000, direct to Wiggle. 258 Juliet Tango, NorCal approach. Advise you have information echo in Monterey. We have echo in Monterey, 8 Juliet Tango. 8 Juliet Tango, roger. Clear direct to Wiggle, cross Wiggle at 6100, clear for the localizer 28 left into Monterey. Clear direct to Wiggle, cross Wiggle at 6100, clear for localizer 28 left approach into Monterey, 8 Juliet Tango. Now that we have the initial clearance for the localizer approach into Monterey, we're going to end the Enroute segment of this flight. In the next video, we're going to start off our approach and we'll talk about the localizer and deep dive into why it is a non-precision approach. So long.